The ProAct Know-How.
Hi, this is ProAct Sam. Welcome to this episode of Living and Working Abroad. Domicile, what does it mean for tax for expats? Domicile is about your origin, where you're from. So it's not always the country of birth literally, but it usually is, and it's to do with your parentage as well. So an expat could be born abroad, obviously from his expat parents, but have a domicile deemed to be his home country, but it could be acquired from the country in which they're in as well. What's the relevance of this? Domicile is used to assess nationality and things like inheritance tax. Now, inheritance tax for UK expats is 40%, potentially of worldwide earnings. Even if it's not their worldwide earnings, it's still potentially 40% of their UK earnings. So if you are lucky enough to own a pile in the centre of London, any sort of domestic dwelling could easily be worth over £1 million, and therefore start to generate inheritance tax of 40% for the family. Now, inheritance tax in the UK is not applied to the spouse, so it's applied on second death, but in other countries it's applied on first death, or it's applied to the beneficiaries, the children. So how do you protect your family and business from inheritance tax with regard to domicile? So an expat can live and work abroad for many years, naturalise, get dual citizenship. Does that mean that the domicile has changed? Yes, it can. The UK have a general rule of thumb that they use to assess domicile, but they'll only do that on death generally. And that rule is the same as a country like Cyprus, where if you've been living and working abroad for 20 years and 17 of those as a tax resident, then you can become domicile in that new country. And with Cyprus, that domicile is 0%. In the UK, it's 40%. In countries like Germany, it's 50%, and 45% in others. So it can make a difference where your tax residence is. But an expat can live and work abroad for 40 years, and if they spend the last 2 months, the last 2 weeks, the last day, or their burial in the UK, then that domicile, that change of domicile to where they're living, reverts back to the UK. So there's always this danger of inheritance tax, which needs to be thought about and planned to protect overseas business and property and assets. So how can expats do that? They can do it by making gifts. And in the UK, there's quite a lot of tax avoidance, but for anti-tax avoidance legislation, so it needs to be looked at carefully about how you manage the arrangements. But for expats, there's more flexibility. So by making gifts to trust, or directly to family, but by making gifts to trust, you can potentially avoid inheritance tax at 40% later on. But better than that, the gift to trust means that you retain control of those assets during your lifetime. So if you need it to fund income, pensions, long-term care, or just lifestyle, then you have control of that for your lifetime, and you can have an influence on how it's used by down the generations for your family, your grandchildren, and beyond. A charitable trust could be set up as well, a foundation for all sorts of greatly and goodly things. You don't need much to set up a trust, you just need to have the will and the desire. So talk to us at ProAct Partnership about how you can protect your assets from the cost and delay of probate and from inheritance tax by using gifts and with potentially no tax liability during your lifetime, and mitigating inheritance tax later on. We've got guides on this and further blogs and information at proactpartnership.com. Go along, have a look there, and download some of the guides. We'll be happy to see you next time. Thanks for listening.
The ProAct Know-How, brought to you by ProAct.